Hi, everybody. I'm Thomas Flight, and this is Jackson. He does video essays for The Ringer and on his own channel, Skip Intro. We did a podcast together for about a year called Stream Theory about television, streaming, the world of streaming,
The streaming
everything.
wars.
Yeah, the streaming wars.
And then Netflix won and it was over.
Yes, yeah. We had to stop because it just ended up us shilling for Netflix every episode over and over
Every
again.
episode would be like, and Netflix continues to kick everyone's ass.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you've never heard stream theory, this is kind of a continuation of some of those conversations. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. But I wanted to talk to Jackson about some things because I watched they're in the video essay world, let's say. There's the film guys, there's there's less of the TV people.
I like to think of myself as the one who's doing
The,
TV
the
content.
one TV guy. But
I know that's
Jackson,
not true, but
I like to.
I like.
You are definitely like I don't know. I don't know of another channel that's like only TV video essay content, which is what you do. So
It's a very thin niche.
I mean, it seems like it shouldn't be. I mean, people watch arguably more TV than they watch movies. So I don't
But
know.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, that's what I thought when I started.
People are just less pretentious about TV, I think
I think that's definitely true.
is
Yeah.
the reality. But yeah, I feel like I have a little bit of a foot in both. But Jackson is the person, at least that I know, who watches more TV than anybody. So if I have questions about TV,
Okay. Yeah. I get.
we come to him.
I definitely watch too much TV. I've only
But
seen like 3 movies in the last year.
you made for your Patreon, you made a like a tier list, a television tier list or something, and
Mhm.
I think it had like 47
And I had
shows.
actually forgotten some. So it was actually when I finished it, I was like, oh, I forgot about like 3 shows. So it was like close to 50. It was
Yeah,
like 50 last year.
that's a pretty solid
It's a
solid.
good sample.
Yeah. I watch a lot more movies than that, but movies are
And
like one.
those are only the ones that came out in 2020. I watched some older
Right,
shows
right.
too
Yeah,
that didn't make
crazy.
the list because who wants to know? It's like a weird apple. It's weird with TV because, and I'm sure you struggle with this with movies too because you're watching stuff that doesn't come out in a single year, and
Yes.
you're like, how do you really compare movies that came out in like 2020 versus, I don't know, if you're doing like an end of the year list, are you going to include all the shows or all the movies you watched that came out in the 70s
Right.
and put them in the same list? I don't know.
I kind of have I don't know. I don't really like those end of the year like top lists, partially for that reason, but also because like it's not quite as bad with TV, I feel like, but with movies, there's this whole thing of like a lot of the good stuff from a year isn't even available for like the general public to watch for like months into the next
Yeah,
year. So like there's a ton of movies that like only got a release late or haven't even been released yet, but it's technically a 2020 film. So I and a bunch of other people, normal people, haven't seen it, but it's on
yeah,
everybody's lists. Or anyway, it's a whole thing. I don't like doing those for those reasons. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to
no,
talk about is COVID and television, which is something
yes.
we kind of covered on Stream Theory over the course of the year. But Jackson had this, I guess, blog post as on his. I'm a patron of his on his Patreon. Uh,
Thank you for that.
yeah, you're welcome. You got to support the arts.
That's
Um,
right.
but you had this post about how COVID is kind of cropping up in like network television, regular television, and some of the implications of that. And I thought it was really interesting. So I wanted to talk to you
Yeah,
about that. Kind of now that we're in this COVID world, enough time has passed that like productions had time to like COVID happened, they could write about it and produce some episodes that actually like have COVID content in it, and we're starting to see
yeah,
some of that. Um, so yeah, I don't know what the best way to jump into that is,
yeah.
but
I guess network television is a great place to look at this because the turnaround is faster. So they're the ones getting to this first. So like Fargo just came out with season 4, but they shot all of that way before. They wrote all of that way before. It's also a period piece. They're not going to talk about any of that stuff. And these other shows that are returning, or like The Boys came out during this, but it was shot way before COVID too, or like right as COVID was starting, I think. So it got finished before lockdown happened. But a lot of these shows that were going to be premiering in the fall got postponed, and then they wrote in a lot of this stuff. And it's weird how there's like this wide variety of different ways to tackle COVID. You see, like, a Grey's Anatomy is about medical drama, so they're talking about it like exclusively. It's like COVID's anatomy, and it's like a step-by-step walkthrough of the entire pandemic through the eyes of a hospital, which is kind of interesting. They did like the PPE shortages. They did like how everyone's being super overwhelmed. They are covering like how little we knew at first. Like in the first episode of the newest season, like a doctor goes home and he's like afraid to like get within, he's like outside undressing, or like stripping and like changing outside, and his wife is like across the yard
Right,
and they're like yelling at each other.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't get too close to you. And then they have like some weird like long distance like phone sex thing. It's weird, but it's not important.
I do remember, I will say, I did like quarantine my clothes at least a few times, like right at the beginning.
I mean, one of the crazy things about this is it's like, I don't know if all of these shows are trying to capture what it was like, or if they're just kind of were written at that time and we didn't know, and then they moved on. But either way, a lot of these shows that are addressing COVID are kind of addressing like what it was like to learn about this thing, which is a really interesting snapshot, because if you look at the numbers of COVID, obviously it was not as bad then as it is now, but people were taking it way more seriously then than they are now, especially in these like epicenters of like big cities, where they were getting hit super hard. And that's where, I mean, Grey's Anatomy takes place in Seattle, but it's like a pretty easy stand-in for any major city. Other shows are, it's like on the horizon. This other really bad TV show I watched called A Million Little Things, which is also on ABC. They turned off Fauci. Like they were like a TV was on and Fauci was like, this pandemic thing might be a big deal. And they just like turned him off, and it's like gonna probably be a thing, but they just aren't dealing with it yet. And then that's like ABC, which I think is doing it very comprehensively. And it's interesting to see like the different networks doing different things. CBS mostly doesn't care. They're letting their shows do whatever they want, and some of them are just like, I think there are three main ways that shows are dealing with this on network TV, and they are all encompassed in the NCIS franchise. There are three NCIS shows. There are NCIS Los Angeles, and NCIS New Orleans, and all three of them have taken wildly different tacks to how they are writing about this. The original NCIS has totally ignored that. They're just like sidestepping it, and they're doing like all flashback. Okay. So it's like how all these characters met each other way back when, I guess. It's like a Better Call Saul NCIS. NCIS Los Angeles has just fast forwarded to when the pandemic is over, and it's just like, it's not a thing anymore. We beat it. Right. Okay.
In the year, do they I think give conjecture as far as what year that is?
I don't know if NCIS Los Angeles has, but the show Last Man Standing with Tim Allen jumped forward 3 years and said that everything was fine then. That's on Fox, not on CBS. Right, but Blue Bloods, which is on CBS and is a show that I'm morbidly curious about, has just decided to they've just decided to not acknowledge it at all. Like they're just
that sounds about right.
It's didn't happen. It's not a thing.
Right.
And their reasoning was that they didn't want to see people in masks, which I get to some degree. It is weird, but it also is weird now. I don't know about you, but when I watch TV, I am like weirded out whenever people aren't wearing masks and they're in a group.
Yeah, it's
unnerving.
It can be strange to see. And like the show The Mandalorian has shown us, you can do a lot dramatically with people who have covered faces.
Arguably, I think that's something some people might contend with.
Yeah. But I think
right.
if somebody rejects that, Werner Herzog would say, "You cowards." Yeah, something like that. So
yeah, I think so.
I think I interrupted you, but there's the 3 NCIS. Yes. We got one.
The last one. Yep.
One is kind of ignoring it through a narrative feature, do something else, do flashbacks. The other is jump forward. And so what's the third one?
And the third one is to treat it like it's the apocalypse. And that's what NCIS New Orleans is doing. There was a shot where there's like a scene in the first episode of this season. Somehow NCIS New Orleans is on season 7 already. Whenever I look at these network TV shows and I'm like looking up clips or something, it's like season 7 premiere. I'm like, we can't even get like another season for Glow, but this is going on, whatever. Anyways, like somebody crashes in their car and he like goes to help them. He puts on his mask first. And then he like looks over and the streets are empty and there's like a coyote on the street. And it's like, like the guy crashed into like this fire hydrant. It's just like spewing water. And it's like very post-apocalyptic. The show FBI, Most Wanted, or I don't know if it's just called FBI or FBI Most Wanted, but that's like a scripted show as well. And they like are doing some kind of raid and they've put on all their PPE and they're doing like knocking on doors and they like break in and the guy is like hoarding masks, I guess, and K95s, and he's on the ground and he's coughing and they're like, wait, he's infected. And it's like the zombie apocalypse. It's it's crazy. There's a lot of responses. And then I guess so those are the 3, and then the fourth one is to just like cover it in real time, which is what I was saying that Grey's Anatomy was doing.
Yeah.
Or the Connors, which is the Roseanne spinoff, since Roseanne is, canceled.
Yes.
Because she's awful. They basically were like, we're just going to keep going with the show, but with everyone who isn't awful on the show. Yeah. And that show is very interesting because it's always been about like working class families and dealing with these like, new world, old world. It's like very much been trying to be like a modern All in the Family, but about like working class people. And they are always wearing their masks, like doing the chin strap, like around their chin. And they're like one of the kids like comes back and like takes off her mask when she gets in, but it's like just around her
got the little mask beard.
Around her
neck beard.
And John Goodman's like, oh, I'm old. And she's like, I'd hug you, but I'm afraid I'm going to get you infected. But I'm like, mask off next to you, so I don't really know. Yeah. I don't know. Which maybe is the most accurate representation of how people
it's pretty. I mean, like that. That's real life. There's a lot of that out there. So.
So yeah, I think those are the 4 major approaches. Like documentation, hyper post-apocalyptic, and finding a way to ignore it, either going forward or going back.
It's interesting.
Or just ignoring it and staying present. Who knows?
Yeah. It's interesting now that you mentioned kind of those different approaches. Like, I can see how that will probably kind of translate into what do you call non-network TV? Premium TV?
Oh, like cable TV?
Cable TV. It's not, I mean, it's not cable TV anymore, but like, the premium ones.
Like FX or any of the streaming services.
Netflix shows and HBO shows and stuff like that.
AMC.
like I can see how some of those shows will probably do similar things where they'll either find a narrative excuse to kind of just like work around it or skip it,
Well,
or
a lot of the shows you're talking about, I'm not sure will even necessarily have to address it because
that's
they're
true.
not
What
like
what
procedural in the same way.
yeah. What
Like,
is there anything current that's like that would be like that? That would be like a
so one of the shows I'm really interested to see they're shooting now is what Succession looks like
right.
in I'm because that's a show that feels very present.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if they're gonna like address that. It seems like something they would be interested in, but it also feels like kind of a tangent from the story that they've been telling.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems like they have a pretty clear direction they want to go. Other shows are kind of like Better Call Saul is obviously not going to touch
It's
on
a period
this.
piece, yeah.
There's no need to do that, and there's a lot of period pieces, and I don't know. These these uh these network shows seem to like need to do it because they're kind of like everyday cops or they're everyday families or whatever else, and they're supposed to be more like relatable and
Yeah.
less,
Yeah.
I guess, cinematic in the way that we think of that, where it's like a singular narrative or whatever else. I don't know if they're going to address it, but one of the interesting things about network TV is that they like one because they are going to have to shoot like fast and they
Right.
just have to turn around things fast.
Yeah.
I feel like they just had to address it more, and I don't know. Some of them just seem like they want to, like they're hungry to like comment on this time that we're living in.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we'll necessarily get into it, but I think people can go join your Patreon and read this post if they want to check it out. But one of the really fascinating things that you talk about is kind of, and you sort of mentioned it earlier, but kind of how like the response and the treatment of the pandemic in these shows, because there's a delay and it's short enough that we're actually seeing COVID stuff now, but it's like COVID response in like March, April, June, July,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And that's different from how people are like treating it now. And so there's this weird like lag politically or culturally or whatever it is
Both,
between how
yeah.
these shows are portraying the response and how the response has like adjusted over time. So I just think that's fascinating to think about, and it'll be interesting to see how that like continues to kind of
Yeah, I
change.
mean, I think with the shows that are like covering it, kind of like documenting it in real time, it's really the most fascinating. Um, Between the way like Grey's Anatomy is doing it, or there was a scene in This Is Us when they're like, "Oh my God, Tom Hanks has the coronavirus." It's like, "Oh wow, remember when we were all freaking out, and that's when it got real for people." Um, and you know, this is something I've been thinking about a lot because of just like being around, but we're taking it so much, like so many more things are open. We've
Yeah.
decided to kind of, in my opinion, kind of give up on a lot of the the things that we knew were going to be effective. Like in the beginning we were saying, oh, we need to lock down, we need to social distance, we need to wear masks, we need to pay people to stay home. And because of politics, because of people got tired of it, which is totally understandable. Like I totally get being tired. I'm sick of it. Uh, but for whatever reason, we just kind of decided that it was time to go back to life as usual. And it's interesting to see these shows that are like 6 months behind, 7 months behind, and they're all freaking out. They're like,
Yeah.
whoa, how are we going to possibly survive this? We're all overwhelmed. We have to go into complete lockdown. I have to take my clothes off outside because, I couldn't possibly worry about like infecting you. You need to stay home because you're high risk. Can't hug grandpa because I'll take my mask off next to him, but that's beside the point. But like we've kind of, and then everybody else, fast forward 6 months and people are just all flying home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it's like, it's just been a very weird juxtaposition.
Yeah. 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 I think it's an interesting I I mean, I guess television has always been like an interesting uh like cultural time capsule. These, especially
Yeah.
these kinds of shows, but like especially during something like this where stuff is changing in extreme ways, and I don't know, it just brings it
Yeah.
it
That's always
makes
been one of my. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just was going to say it makes clear how much of a sort of cultural like time capsule it is.
Yeah. One of the things I've always really liked the most about, or I've really liked about TV, and one of its like defining features is because it is like this quick turnaround, and because it like stretches on for years, it becomes like I think a very like accurate snapshot of like culture. Like if you ever go back and you watch like old episodes of Cheers, you can see like how the show changed over the 10 years it was on TV, and like a lot of the jokes that are in like the first 3 seasons are just like really cringy, and they're about like, oh my god, there's a gay person in the bar, this is
Right.
like
Yeah.
awful, and like a black person shows up and it's awkward, and like by the end of the show they're not doing that as much, but you can see that that was like widely accepted back then
Yeah.
as like as a joke. And you can see episodes like Blackish that came out like right after the 2016 election, and you kind of get these like recordings of what people thought at different times,
Yeah.
that are like much more reactionary.
Yeah. Because
Have you seen?
in film and cable television, it's the delay is so long that it's like even if a quick it's fast if a movie comes out about an event like 5 years later, like that's a
Yeah.
fast turnaround. So film's view of things is much more like or
it's
just
always it's
like
always like more retrospective.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I don't know when The Big Short came out, but that was like 5-6 years after the financial crisis,
yeah,
and like they had a much more comprehensive look at like the timeline that was leading up to that crisis. But I don't, they didn't. I'm not sure they captured like the freaking out about it in the same way that like a TV show might have.
yeah,
Not that there were any TV shows that were really talking about like the financial crisis, but just as an example.
right.
I think by the
um
time we start to see coronavirus in TV in movies, I think it's going to be much more hindsight's 2020. Um, we've reflected on this, and this is what we think about it.
Yeah. And we'll get the slate of like COVID shows and COVID movies where it's
Yeah,
like it's a specific drama or thing about, even if it's not about it directly, it'll be like, oh, this post-apocalyptic movie is clearly about,
it's
coronavirus
like
or
season
whatever.
6 of American Crime Story. It'll
Right. Yeah.
be
Yeah.
Hurricane Katrina and then COVID.
What have you noticed on uh I haven't been watching that much reality TV. I watched Survivor back. They had a season that kind of ended during COVID as it
Yep.
was starting. And then I've watched like Great British Bake Off did like a bubble. They had a bubble where they just had all
Okay.
the contestants. And I'm assuming that's how like most of the shows are doing it now. Is that the case?
Yeah. I mean, it's unclear to me. It's not as easy as you would think it would be to find like the the answers to a lot of these things. Sometimes reality TV shows will be shot like a year in advance,
Right.
and like a show just came out that was like some like Christmas lighting showdown thing where a bunch of people dress up their houses in lights and they like battle of whatever.
Yeah.
And that was shot in 2019, so they didn't have like watching. If you watch the clips, it just came out, and you're like, oh my god, why are all of these people in like a group with no mask on, and they all have like southern accents, and then you make like a bunch of wild jumps, and then you look it up, and it's like, oh, it was shot in
Right.
like 2019.
Yeah.
This isn't just like a bunch of people who hate restrictions. And then my like go to, or the one that I watch the most consistently are all the Bachelor shows.
Right.
First season they postponed everything. The Bachelorette they shot at like a resort, so they had everybody come in. They had to quarantine for like 2 days on or 2 weeks on each side. So
Yeah.
like before they came, than once they did. So they did the bubble kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't travel at all, which is like a huge part of the Bachelorette, is they're always like going all over the world doing, I don't know, they're like a travel brochure. They probably get like tons of subsidies for doing that. This season, the season of The Bachelor just started, and they've upgraded from like a small time resort to like they found some gigantic mansion in like Pennsylvania, like rural Pennsylvania. It's like it looks like the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's like gigantic. I keep thinking like I can't understand why this building ever existed in rural Pennsylvania, but nobody seems to have that answer for me.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's a bubble. It looks like they're going to travel in the previews for the rest of the season, but they haven't yet. I don't know how that will work. But everybody is there right now, and like the hosts have to stay on. There was a part in The Bachelorette where Chris Harrison, who is the host of the entire franchise, was like, fuck this, I'm going to like move my kid into college. And he like left, and then he was out for like 5 weeks or something. And then he came back at the very end, but obviously he had to like quarantine going out and in.
Yeah.
That seems to be the way that they're doing it, if they can. If it's like one of those kinds of like, they're in a bubble already. A lot of these shows are like designed to be bubbles where you can't talk to anybody because American reality TV show is psychotic like that. But that seems to be the general approach.
That's an interesting aspect. This is kind of almost completely unrelated, but that's an interesting aspect of like a lot of these reality shows that I don't know if we've ever talked about, but like a lot of them, like The Circle, Netflix is The Circle or whatever. You don't. They're supposed to be these sort of like social experiment type deals, whatever. Yeah. And you don't have phone use during the show. You don't have like a smartphone, which is not the point of the show, but it strikes me that like for a lot of people now, that's probably the most significant element of being on a show like this is like, even like something like Survivor, you obviously have a lot of, other distractions. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You don't have food or whatever, but like you also don't have a phone. You're not on the internet. You're not on. So it's like the common element of a lot of these different reality shows is that they're isolating people from this thing that's so common in our lives.
Yeah, they try to like make it look like very modern in that like they're all doing things like The Bachelor they're like they don't look like they're on a desert island, but I mean they are essentially. And there's been a lot of like writing about how like producers on different reality shows, and I can't name specifics because I don't remember them off the top of my head, but they'll control your access to food. They'll control your access to, okay, now you guys all have to be in a room and talk to each other. Now you can be by yourself. And just like kind of control these things in order to kind of like amp up the conditions for drama.
Right. Yeah.
Because the less control you have, the more you're going to just like lash out at people. And they used to be a lot more liberal with alcohol, but then I know on The Bachelor, they had obviously that did not lead to great results. So now they've like limited that. But I don't know, like Bachelor in Paradise, they're on like on a beach and it's really hot and there's no air conditioning and they just like throw them all together and they have nothing to do all day except just be on the beach.
Boredom is a powerful force. Like on a film, if you've ever spent time on any kind of film set, like, even just a regular film set can get pretty like boring. And so.
And a lot of times they won't let them bring, like there was a show called Are You the One? I don't know if it's still on, but it ran for a couple seasons, was on MTV. And it was one of these dating shows where they throw everyone into a house. There's like 20 guys or like 10 guys, 10 girls, or maybe 20 of each. I don't remember. I think it's 10 of each. And there's supposed to be a correct match for each person. And their job is to like figure it out. But they didn't allow them like any like paper or like pens, so they can't like actually write any of the information down.
Yeah.
So they all have to like come up with like all these crazy ways because they want to like make it as hard as possible. Because like if you do the math,
Yeah.
there was like someone who was doing like a blog, and they were like, oh, they would figure it out with like 4 weeks left. They were like, statistically, it has to be this match because this isn't a match, this isn't a match, this isn't a match.
Right.
They just do the logic puzzle, but they like can't let them do that because they need
Yeah.
it to be more dramatic.
They're trying to make a show here, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's conversely, that's one of the interesting things about a show like, and I'm sure there's a few other shows like this, but it's the only one I can think off the top of my head. Like Terrace House, the Japanese show, where like people are actually on that show while it's coming out, and they're like on their phones, and that can lead to some really like bad situations too. I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah.
They shut down the most recent season of that because the one girl was getting harassed and then ended up committing suicide after.
Right.
And so I don't know. It's just an interesting, like, yeah, I just got on this mental tangent about the phones and their relationship to reality TV. So I don't really have a point.
I mean, yeah, phones are definitely. I mean, it's weird to say this, but like phones are changing the scope of reality TV.
Right.
The
TV landscape.
The landscape. That's what I'm looking for. I know that Instagram kind of like revitalized the Bachelor franchise because it became like people that follow it now, like they follow like professional sports where they'll follow their favorite contestants, and you know, you can see who's hanging out with who, and then they'll come back for, you know, this season of this or this season of that, and there's like intermingling, and you can kind of like try to figure out the spoilers and who's where at what time and all of this other stuff. And it kind of like reached a younger audience through that.
I think that's part of the appeal too for people going on these shows. I remember I was watching, I think
it's absolutely the incentive. Yeah.
Too Hot to Handle, or one of the Netflix schlocky, you know, reality shows. And I like looked up one of the contestants, and there were all these articles from all these different websites about the contestant. And like they were similar enough that I was like, oh, there was obviously, I don't know if the show did it for the contestant or if the contestant had some kind of, you know, publicist or PR team as they were going onto the show, but there was obviously like a press release about who this person was, and they were sort of like, you know, because it was like the articles like, oh, they have this boat and they do this, and like all the articles mentioned like the same things. So this person was obviously like trying to set themselves up so that, oh, I'm going to go on the show, people are going to Google me, and when they do, they're going to find out all this stuff about me, and you know, they're trying to create an image and a
I mean, if you go far enough on these shows, I always use The Bachelor because it's kind of like the biggest franchise that I'm familiar with. But like, if you go far enough, you'll have like 1 million followers on Instagram. Yeah. And it's not hard to turn 1 million followers into like an influencer career. Yeah. So it becomes like, I was listening to a podcast with, and it was Fox, I think it was Recode, and they were talking about how there's always this thing that they're talking about where it's like, are you here for the right reason? Are you here for the right reasons? The right reasons being like love, right?
Right, yeah.
But kind of the right reasons have changed. It's like, are you here to like selfless, like just like promote your brand, or are you here to just be here and get the side effect of promoting your brand?
Yeah.
Like, are you just being like too transparent about your like trying to gain Instagram followers, or are you like being authentic and you're getting them that way? And like I don't know how many people are really buying into the love aspect of it anymore. Like people are like, oh, they'll date, but I don't know how many people think that they're going to get like married and stay together forever. They're just like, I don't know. I mean, maybe people are, I
don't remember who it is. Somebody's made this point somewhere. I stole it from somebody. But like I think there's this idea now with a lot of reality TV shows like The Bachelor, as it's kind of gained a lot of prominence, that like everybody feels like they are watching the show sort of ironically. Like,
Yes.
and they like imagine this audience out there that they're like, there's a bunch of people who are watching this show and they believe it. They're really caught up in it. But I'm above that. I
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watch
Yeah.
it ironically, and I'm sort of like, aloof to the whole thing. And I think that mode of like experiencing reality TV is actually now the primary way most people are experiencing reality TV. Like most people are watching it ironically, and
Yeah.
and they're being produced for people to watch ironically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I this is an even greater tangent, so I don't know.
That's
Feel
what we're
free.
here for.
Okay, but there was this Netflix show. Well, it was on Lifetime. Then it got picked up by Netflix. It was called, and you've probably heard of it, but it's called You. Stars
Yes.
Penn Badgley, and the second season gets picked up by Netflix, and um, I was watching it and I was totally expecting to just be like, oh, ha ha ha, this is like can't be trash, whatever. And it is, but it also like is totally aware that you think that, and it is like playing off of that. And I feel like that's like the next stage is these shows that are like weaponizing your expectations of it being this like ironic watching
Yeah.
against you
Yeah.
in order to make some other commentary. And like the commentary in You is like you underestimate these like nice guys like this guy, but he's like a sociopath stalker, and you think that he's like whatever just because he's like a quote unquote nice guy, but like that's how a lot of these like stalkers are or whatever. Which I thought was like a really interesting creative decision, and I don't know if they're gonna try and like weaponize it in the same way on like these reality shows where they're kind of like suckering you in, like, oh, you think that we're just like that we don't know how you're watching this, but we know. Do. Yeah, exactly, and that's part of the gag.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know. It's interesting. I think that's inevitable sort of in the reality TV space. Like it feels like something that's I mean, I would love that show. I'd love to be watching a reality show and then like kind of realize that they're sort of playing me a little bit.
I feel like a lot of these shows are.
I mean, they're already playing you.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
already playing you, but that's not the point of the show. Like they're not doing it. They're not doing it for commentary. They're doing it because they know you're gonna watch it and it's entertaining.
I feel like we got close with Tiger King, where it was like not really about that. It was about us being like. It was about us like spectating. That's not a word. Spectating, and being like voyeur audiences to this like crazy world, and that how that kind of like makes us complicit, I guess. But I don't know how like successful it was, but I think that was kind of what they were going for.
Yeah. That's definitely an aspect that's been explored, I think, in sort of like where the lines between like documentary TV and documentary film and reality. That's now that I'm thinking about it, that's an interesting, I haven't researched that much, but that's an interesting distinction that's definitely in my head and definitely in the culture somewhere. But the lines are very gray
between documentary
like,
and reality.
What counts as a documentary series and what counts as like reality television? It's very like,
I think because
Tiger King is kind of like right on that dividing line, whatever it is.
I think it has a lot to do with what you're talking about. Like if we take it seriously, it's more of a documentary, and if we think it's kind of trashy, we think of it as, and then you kind of get into like what's the difference between trashy and serious? Like, is it really just how the audience perceives it? Is like, and maybe that's all there is to it, But I kind of feel like the Great British Bake Off, if it wasn't a competition show, it would be viewed as a documentary. The same way that like Anthony Bourdain's shows were considered, I think, more documentary than reality, because it was more of this like serious. Let's explore this subject rather than let's watch this subject.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Great British Bake Off, because one of the things that's unique about that show is how sort of undramatic it is, right? Like that's why a lot of people like it, is it feels more naturalistic and less like, you don't get the feeling that there's producers behind the scenes like trying to drum up drama. Everybody just sort of like, whatever. So one of the things I was thinking about as we're talking about this in terms of that distinction between documentary and reality is, I think ironically, one of those distinctions is there's almost an expectation with reality TV that there is a level of manipulation. Like, we
Yeah.
know there are producers. It's not actually reality. It's a constructed environment. There's people kind of trying to drum up drama. Whereas documentary, if you found out that Tiger King, the filmmakers were sort of manipulating the people on screen to kind of try and create drama, I think a lot of people would feel a little bit cheated. Whereas you don't feel that if you find that out about reality TV, because everybody sort of knows it's like they're in on the lie. Whereas with documentary, it still maintains this idea that it's like untampered with. It is
Yeah.
reality, or it's
I
trying
think
to
one of the
present reality.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also puts Tiger King on that like cusp is that the people who were being interviewed that were the subjects were clearly trying to use the documentary to boost their own fame and personal popularity in a way that most people use reality TV.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it became like that. I think that's part of the reason why it was like hard to tell, because it was clear that there was like ulterior motives all over the
Yeah.
place. And usually from a documentary, we're expecting it to be about the thing,
Right.
about the subject. Like if they were just advocating for how they're doing, like we think there should be big cat zoos or we don't think there should be. But
Yeah.
instead it was like, I want to run for president and
Right. Yeah.
I want to like do all this other stuff. And it was like a totally different monster. And I think that was part of the allure, was it was like, what are we even looking at?
It was almost like a documentary TV approach to reality TV characters. It was like,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of what you were getting at with like the subject matter and what we perceive as trashy versus like, you know, so I think that's part of it, is like the characters that we feel like we should be seeing on a reality TV show. So
Yeah, I
even
mean,
if,
we walk into these shows with so much, with so many expectations. I don't think we always
yeah,
think about them. There's like there was this book I was reading that was, and this is a thing with all of television. I think that television has been fighting against for a really long time, of being taken like more seriously, especially by like, because it's never gonna not be compared to film, because
right,
film is like its big brother,
yeah,
and film is always seen as this more serious endeavor, and TV is seen as, less serious or pulpier or whatever else. And there's a lot of like TV scholars, as if you can call them that, who have like drawn distinctions or like connections between TV and like serial, like Dickensian era, like I'm trying to think of what they were called. I think they were just called like serial novels, but there was just like a new
right,
chapter every week, and it was like
yeah,
soap opera-y. And the part of the reason that they were seen as like trashier was because they were way more accessible to people, and because of the audience that watched them was mostly, or read them, was mostly women, and they just kind of like poo-pooed anything that was reaching out to those audiences because it wasn't the more traditional power structure. And I think, I don't think we see the exact same thing in TV by any means. But I think there is like especially with like shows like The Bachelor, or shows that are often about like these like love games or romance, are often looked at as like targeted towards a certain audience, like some kind of imagined like housewife who isn't really watching that carefully and doesn't really care, and or is like folding laundry at the same time, or I mean, this person might not even exist, but it doesn't matter.
right,
Like
yeah,
we kind of think of it as being for that person, and we watch it ironically, and then they realize that we're watching it ironically, and it's really for us, not for
right,
this imagined person.
yeah.
And I
But
think we're switching over there now.
the existence of that imaginary audience is almost like part of the I'm sure somebody in the theory space,
Yeah,
whatever,
I've read
has
a little
written
bit
about
about
this.
it, but I don't have. It's not my area of expertise.
But like the existence of that imaginary audience, I'm sure like it plays a role in sort of like allowing people who feel like too good for that kind of TV to like watch it, because like if they knew it was just being targeted at them, they'd be like, oh, I'm too good for that. But like it's that ability to engage. So I think these shows almost have to maintain that sort of like detached irony.
They have to give you an out.
Yeah. Which is something, I mean, I made a video essay that was kind of about this, that talked about Terrace House, where it's like they literally give you a virtual audience that's watching the show in the show, and you kind of like participate with that. So I don't know. So we see that kind of thing with like, we see other areas where consuming a piece of media is like mediated by an artificial audience with like Twitch or like reaction videos or like Let's Play.
Sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
We see like we see other examples. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Of mediated like viewership of media on things like Twitch or in reaction videos or whatever, where there's like sort of an artificial secondary, or like there's an artificial audience that's like consuming it, and then the actual viewer is like another layer removed. So I don't know why that is or why that's so appealing, but it, you know, it's definitely a thing.
I think it gives you like, I think it goes back to that like participation versus watching aspect. Like if you are like, I see a lot of like Twitch streamers, they post their videos on YouTube and the chat will be up on the side. And like, I don't know what the purpose of that is, because like in a practical sense, like I can't interact with that chat. It's on YouTube. Right. Like it's a video that I just pull up, but people were doing that. So you kind of get this like you're watching this thing that's happening, and it feels more like a documentation thing, as opposed to I'm following it week to week and I'm really into the game. It gives you like a more meta more meta like viewpoint to watch the whole thing. It gives you like more distance to, I don't know, you don't have to like necessarily endorse everything that's going on. You're not part of that community necessarily, but you can still like enjoy it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, there's definitely an aspect of like, we like to consume things socially. Like, why do we go to movie theaters and watch with a bunch of other people? And
I don't know. Why do you go to movie theaters?
That's a good question. Well, a lot of people are asking themselves that this year. But like, you know, besides just getting to see something before it comes out or on a better system, it's like there is, for some people anyway, they like the social aspect of it. Or for TV, you know, there's a lot of people. A lot of people aren't satisfied to just watch a show and then go, oh, I watched it. You know, it's like they want to talk to somebody about it. They go on Reddit, they go on Twitter, they
make video essays.
They make video essays. This is kind of a very pretentious externality of just talking to people about things.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, we like social consumption, and I think it's an aspect of that. But then there's the secondary layer, which is like what we're talking about with it's almost like everybody is imagining, if you imagine a football game, there's like the regular seats and then there's like the owner's box. And
it's like watching one of these games with no rooting interest. Like you're just watching, like if you watched the Super Bowl as a television program as opposed to a sporting event, like you're like analyzing like what camera angles they're using, like, oh, why the broadcast decided to say X, Y, and Z about this thing that was happening.
Yeah. But that's how most people are. I think that's how a majority of people now are consuming like things like The Bachelor, where they're like,
I think so,
or at least they imagine themselves to be consuming it in that way, which is, I don't know, it's fascinating. So
you'll hear like a lot of people. I mean, this has been my college roommate was really into reality TV. And he would always be like, oh, you can tell who's going to get cut because of the edit, whatever edit they got. So like the show is setting you up to root for this character, and then they're going to, at the elimination ceremony or whatever, be like, they're going to either cut them or keep them. And it's going to be based off of this edit expectation that you've been building up. And people on blogs will talk about that and stuff. And that's kind of like a both ways of doing that.
Right.
So they're viewing it like as a TV show, but as a TV show to figure out what is actually going to happen. It's It's crazy how many different ways there are to view these things.
And a lot of producers now, they know that, and like they will put red herrings into edits, and or edit a red herring into things. And
They always, in the first episode of every season of The Bachelor, there's like a third of the cast gets cut on the first night or whatever, right? And one of the people that they will give like a big spotlight to in that first episode is going to go home.
Right. Yeah.
And it's weird from like a TV perspective to invest that much time in a character that we are never going to see again, but they have to do that in order to make it not obvious. Yeah, and that illusion is so much of a part of the thing.
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting tangent. We got there from COVID television. So let's I want to wrap up before too long, but tell me give me at least something you're kind of looking forward to or speculating about in like 2021.
In 2021,
it's going to be a weird year. So 2020 was a weird year for film because the way we watch movies got shut down.
Yes.
And there's going to be this weird drawn out effect of like productions were affected, and so films will be weird for a while because we'll see sort of the after. But 2020 wasn't that weird of a year. I mean, there was some odd bits, but it wasn't that weird of a year for TV because we all just watch TV at home. But enough time has passed now that I think 2021 will probably, I'm guessing, be a weirder year for TV than maybe 2020 was. So I don't know.
I think we're going to feel a lot of those like production gaps now in 2020 for like a lot of the movies that were supposed to come out in 2020 or in theaters were like finished. They just didn't know how to release them.
Yeah.
And TV didn't have that problem because they're just streaming it right into your house.
Yeah.
But now we're getting to the point where like Succession hasn't finished their third season. I don't know what the deal is with Euphoria. Who knows when Better Call Saul will ever come back? Like stuff like that. And there might be some like limited series that come out of nowhere and like they're done basically already, like the Queen's Gambit did last year. But it's hard to know what ones are going to be successful that way. I guess the thing that I'm interested in is just how it is kind of that in the last couple of years, we've seen like this growing limited series thing in TV where the most successful, the most popular shows are these like 8-episode runs that just start and end and they're done. And a lot of times they're on like Netflix or Hulu. And we're seeing less and less, fewer and fewer shows, I think, that are multi-season endeavors. And I'm kind of interested to see if COVID really has any kind of impact on that because of the production schedule. But I'm also not sure if we're going to see that this year, if that's going to be like a 5-year window thing or who knows. Yeah. I have no crystal ball.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about whether or not it would impact that aspect of things, but I definitely think it'll only continue to speed along this sort of blending of television and film. I wrote in my newsletter, I wrote a thing about on Amazon Prime, they did Steve McQueen, the film director, did a
they did that
it was like a 5 episode like film anthology, basically, is the best way to put it. But it's like class as a TV show, but it was basically 5 movies. They at least some of them premiered at like film festivals.
The Ringer was having a hard time whether to put those on their best TV shows of the year or their best movies of the year. I know that there was like debate there.
Yeah.
But I think the lines are getting really blurry. Limited series is a huge part of that for sure.
Yeah. And part of it is just like, part of the limited series thing, I think, is just the economics of it. Like if you want to pull film talent into the TV world, like it's a hard sell to be like, we need you to sign up for, we don't know how many seasons.
4 seasons. Yeah.
Whereas if you can be like, we're going to produce this thing, it's going to take 4 months, then you can go back to Hollywood, to the film world,
it depends. Yeah. For the big stars. Yeah, that's true. But I think that I think TV still has an ability to be kind of like Star Maker
Yes.
thing,
Yeah.
because they can give kind of stability through that multi-season thing for people who haven't broken out yet, and provide them an ability to break out. But who knows?
Well, cool. It was great to chat. Thanks
absolutely.
for filling me in on all the COVID.
And now you don't have to watch Blue Bloods.
Now I don't have to watch Blue Bloods. Speaking of which, if people are watching this and you want to know why Blue Bloods, I can't even say it, is so interesting, I guess.
Let's go with that.
Jackson has a great video about it as part of his propaganda series.
Yeah.
Check that out.
I watched it so you don't have to.
Yeah.
That's my pitch.
Skip Intro is your YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description to that. Where can people find you other than
Twitter? You can find me on Skip Intro. I'm doing a series on cop shows for the past couple months. Should have 2 more episodes coming out soon. They're both basically done. I just have to post them and do the back end stuff. And they're about our police and media, because cop shows are still like 60% of the TV shows on network television.
It's a crazy number.
And just like also all over the place. Like you think about how many cop shows you've seen and shows that have the police in them. And that felt like a thing. You can find me on Twitter at SkipIntroYT for YouTube. And my Patreon is somewhere. Skip Intro too.
Let's go to Twitter or the YouTube channel. You'll find everything else. Everything else there. It also Blue Buds. I can't say it. And your video on The Wire is also really good. One of these days, we'll do one of these. We've been talking about for a long time, doing one of these conversations about The Wire, because we
absolutely
have talked about that extensively. So I kind of don't know what else is left for us to say about it, but I'm sure we can find something. So
when I started making the thing about The Wire, I was like, I don't know how much I'm gonna have to say about it. And then it was like the longest thing I've ever written, so I don't know. And then I got done and I was like, man, I didn't talk about this or this, so there's always more. It's such a dense show.
My Wire series was originally going to be like, I was like, it'd probably be like 1 15-minute video or something, and then I think I made like 3.
How many was
it? 3. I only did 3 then. I probably could have done 4. I might revisit it. I have another one kind of bouncing around in my head that I might revisit at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe
I think mine was like 37 minutes.
We probably
have about the same content.
Have about the same length of content, between the two.
You just were smarter and split it up over multiple videos, get more views.